This was a reenactment of an actual incident that took place on George's Banks off Nova Scotia, Canada in the fall of 1999. After 4 hours in an Ovatek rigid life raft, the U.S. Coast Guard successfully rescued the crew of the Double Dolphin. Several sinkings have occurred in which Ovatek rafts have played a role in saving lives. Please contact Ovatek Incorporated for specific details. John Ball is the general manager of Ovatek, a Ba-Caraquet, New Brunswick company, changing the status quo of maritime survival equipment.
We think that the design of the Ovatek will significantly improve a person's chances of survival, and we would like to see it as a standard for the world.
In 1985, armed with a list of 20 fatalities at sea, directly attributed to the failure of conventional life rafts, Ovatek set out to build a better life raft. After 10 years of research and development, manufacturing commenced on the Ovatek Esperanto 6 rigid life raft. Made of fiberglass with a buoyant foam core, an Ovatek life raft looks like an egg and has many of the same qualities.
It's a combination of two fiberglass hulls, an inner and an outer. The two are assembled. We then inject foam into that hollow between the two shells and then assemble the parts. So what you end up with is a rigid egg that is very, very strong and will withstand severe conditions.
Like an egg, it is streamlined and watertight once its two hatches are sealed. Even in the worst seas, the occupants remain warm and dry.
In sea disasters, more people die from hypothermia than die from drowning. Staying warm is a very, very critical component to surviving.
Like an egg, it is bottom-weighted and self-righting. This reduces time spent in the water in the event a raft is overturned and greatly improves the odds of survival.
If it is thrown into the water in an emergency situation, it will automatically right itself and make it much easier for the crew to get inside, spend less time in the water.
The rigid egg-shaped shell removes any fear the raft will puncture or deflate, a seemingly simple concept that may actually save lives. The egg is often called nature's perfect shape. It is very aerodynamic and is one of nature's most structurally efficient designs. Vincent Theriault, Ovatek's inventor, had these characteristics in mind when he chose the egg shape for the world's first rigid life raft. After nearly 10 years of research and development, Ovatek rigid life rafts received Canadian and U.S. Coast Guard SOLAS approval. Within a few short years, the company had sold and installed more than 500 units. Ovatek builds its rigid life rafts using a unique construction technique that guarantees each unit is unsinkable, able to absorb a severe impact, and eliminates the risk of hypothermia and heat stress. Every Ovatek life raft is equipped with a cradle and hydrostatic release to attach it to the boat. Inside the raft is a SOLAS A pack, which contains 2 sea anchors, 2 paddles, a 3-day supply of food and water, thermal blankets, a flashlight, a radar reflector, a bailing can, smoke canisters, parachute rockets, flares, a first aid kit, a 30-meter throw ring, lights, a hand pump, and instruction manuals. A training video is also included. The Coast Guard requires the following tests as part of the approval process. Ovatek rigid life rafts self-right automatically. This reduces time spent in the water. Flooded, an Ovatek is still usable. With a 4-person crew on board and the Ovatek 4 filled to the hatch opening with water, a 5th person cannot sink or capsize the capsule. Standard drop test. An Ovatek 4 is dropped from a height of 20 feet, 6 meters, without sustaining damage. SOLAS drop test, Ovatek 7. The Ovatek 7 is dropped from a height of 60 feet, 18 meters. At impact, the raft is traveling at 45 miles per hour, 70 kilometers per hour. Only light stress fractures occur. These tests were devised by Ovatek to illustrate the incredible strength and durability of their product. Unsinkable life raft remains dry inside. A 10,000-pound, 4,600 kilogram block of concrete attached to the cradle of an Ovatek 7 could not sink the Ovatek. With an additional 2,000 pounds of sand added inside, the unit was lowered to a depth of 2 meters, at which time the hydrostatic release activated. Throughout this exercise, the raft remained dry inside. Extreme drop test. The Ovatek is dropped on a parking lot to test its breaking point. Strength to survive a severe impact. With 1,200 pounds, 550 kilograms of sand inside, the Ovatek 7 is repeatedly smashed against a steel barge. This simulates an impact that could occur in a severe storm and tests the integrity of the shell joints. Hatch failure unlikely. This test evaluates the strength of the front hatch, hinge, and fasteners. Ultimate strength test. The upper canopy is subjected to the ultimate strength test using a 10-pound sledgehammer. Destruction test. A backhoe attempts to cut the unit in half. Ovatek rigid life rafts have a number of advantages that improve the likelihood of surviving a sea disaster and differentiate them from competitors. Ease of boarding. During a sea disaster, there are 2 ways to use an Ovatek rigid life raft. The first method is to enter the Ovatek on the ship's deck using it as a safe haven to wait out a storm. Should the boat sink, the quick release would be pulled and the capsule with crew on board would float free. The second method is to launch the Ovatek by pushing or throwing it overboard. On deployment, an internal water ballast on the Ovatek 7 and an external one on the Ovatek 4 fill with seawater to provide stability. After folding down a rigid ladder, boarding is easy. A group of fishermen following a Canadian Coast Guard life raft training course were asked by their instructor to compare the ease of boarding an Ovatek versus an inflatable life raft. The result is obvious. Protection from hypothermia. Ovatek rigid life rafts are constructed with a double-walled fiberglass shell filled with a polyurethane foam core. This construction provides a strong structure as well as protection from hypothermia and heat stress. Unsinkable. The foam core and structural design of an Ovatek rigid life raft creates up to 12,000 pounds or 5,500 kilograms of buoyancy. In the event that a boat sinks with an Ovatek still attached, the hydrostatic release will activate. It is unlikely the capsule would hang up in the boat's rigging. Automatic self-righting. Ovatek rigid life rafts self-right automatically. This reduces time spent in the water. No annual service repack. Initially, an Ovatek rigid life raft costs more than its inflatable counterpart. However, an Ovatek raft does not require an annual inspection and repack. This means when factoring in annual service fees on an inflatable raft, an Ovatek raft will cost about half as much over time. Ovatek Incorporated manufactures the world's only no-service life rafts. Our unique life raft design has taken more than 10 years to perfect. What is unique about these rafts? Everything. In addition to not requiring an annual repack, Ovatek rigid life rafts are self-righting, unsinkable, and fire-resistant. They can also be used as a safe haven to wait out a storm without launching. The dual hull foam core construction provides protection from hypothermia and has the strength to withstand a severe impact. Ovatek has received extensive media coverage of their unique new design, with more than 80 articles written about them by publications worldwide. These life rafts have been used successfully in several sinkings and have saved lives. Ovatek.